Mahoraga is a force that can adapt to any and all phenomena and is so powerful that only one person has been able to tame its legendary power, with that being Ryomen Sukuna. But what would happen if Luffy somehow made his way into the JJK verse and had to battle against the perpetually adapting and evolving beast that is Mahoraga? In today's video, I'll be discussing just that. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and comment to help support me and the channel. And with all that being said, let's go over Mahoraga and see what it can do. Now, there are two distinct versions of Mahoraga that we need to talk about for this video, the first being Megumi's Mahoraga and the second being Sukuna's, with both varying in terms of strength, speed, etc. And many people might think that there aren't any differences between Megumi and Sukuna using the 10 Shadows technique, but there actually is. For one, we know that depending on who's using the technique, it can make the Shinigami stronger or weaker, because when Megumi is using the technique, the Shinigami are all regular sized and seem to be pretty balanced for the most part. And then when Sukuna is in Megumi's body while using the technique, his Nue is massively bigger than Megumi's and is possibly more powerful as well, given that Nue's lightning was shown covering more distance than normal. And this could be attributed to Sukuna having higher cursed energy reserves and output than Megumi, so he is able to put more of his cursed energy into the Shikigamis to make them stronger, although this doesn't seem to affect Mahoraga. But you could make a case for it being stronger under Sukuna, since when Megumi used it during Shibuya, in the manga it was getting beat up by him pretty blatantly, and in the anime it was portrayed that they were having an intense back and forth. So Mahoraga, while being used by Megumi, is either sub 15 finger Sukuna or equal to 15 finger Sukuna, depending on how you interpret the anime and manga. And in the manga, while being used by Sukuna, he is able to contend with Gojo post-prison realm and mini training arc, who should be many times stronger than 15 finger Sukuna during Shibuya. So now that we've established that there are some differences between Megumi and Sukuna's Mahoraga, now let's go over its AP to see how strong it actually is. When talking about this, there are the usual scaling metas that you could apply to Mahoraga. You could say that he's around the town to city levels of power, going off of Jogo's maximum meteor, with town level coming from Calcs of the feet and the city level going off of the story, with Jogo's maximum meteor being able to incinerate entire city blocks and buildings. Or you could scale Mahoraga off of Jogo and Dagon's domains, with Jogo's creating a mountain and Dagon's creating an island, which could be consistent if you believe Megumi's version of Mahoraga is at least sub 15 finger Sukuna level, with Sukuna at this point already scaling above Jogo, who scales above Dagon. And I don't think Mahoraga scales to Yuki's black hole, and this is because not only are there not any characters who can actually tank the full version of the ability, but even when it is actively suppressed and not as powerful as it should be, Kenjaku barely survived it while using his anti-gravity curse technique, and he's the only example we have to go off of. So because of this and the fact that we don't know the upper limits of her ability, along with the fact that we haven't seen any other characters tank this move, then it should be reasonable to assume that Mahoraga wouldn't be able to survive this attack without his adaptation. So no, he does not scale to planetary levels of power. And with his AP talked about, now let's go over his speed next. So when it comes to Mahoraga's speed, the most effective and simplest way is to scale him off of other characters. We know that 20 finger Maguna and Gojo are both way faster than the likes of base Kashimo and Hikari. Hikari was able to seemingly dodge Kashimo's lightning at near point blank range. Now, even if you don't believe that he did dodge it and it was already near the side of his body, the fact that he was still able to react to some capacity and move should at least make him around the hypersonic ranges of speed. But if you think that he did indeed move out of the way from his head to his arm or shoulder, then you could argue him being around massively hypersonic to massively hypersonic plus. And Sukuna's Mahoraga scales above this feat. Now for this next part, I'll go over the light speed meta and why I don't think Mahoraga is at this level of speed. Now the first reason is because Kashimo's electromagnetic waves aren't in a vacuum, so they aren't actually moving at light speed, which would be required for them to do so. The second thing is injured 20 finger Sukuna dodging one of Kashimo's attack. You could argue this not being a light speed or FTL level speed feat, since there is a likely chance that Sukuna aim dodged the attack. And for those that don't know, aim dodging is basically seeing an attack coming your way and moving out of the way accordingly. It's like you seeing a car speeding towards you and you move out of the way to not get hit. You aren't as fast or faster than the car, you just seen it coming and were able to move because of that. Sukuna sees Kashimo's attack coming and is able to move out of the way. But other times when he is fighting Kashimo, he gets completely blitzed by him and is unable to react, which should mean that he shouldn't scale to light speed and by proxy Mahoraga too. And it's really obvious that Megumi's Mahoraga does not scale to this level of speed either, so I won't talk about that. And now let's go over Mahoraga's ability of adaptation, as this is a deciding factor for this versus battle. Now, Mahoraga's adaptation is compared to a late throw in rock, paper, scissors, and is said to be able to adapt to any and all phenomena. And this basically means that it can adapt to literally any and everything. And the way the adaptation works is that once Mahoraga receives an attack, it'll begin processing the adaptation over time, and if it keeps getting hit with the same type of attacks, it'll speed up the process, and once the wheel on its head turns, then it'll completely adapt to whatever was able to damage it before. And once it does, then the attacks that were used on it before it adapted can no longer affect it at all. And the only way to defeat Mahoraga is to either one-shot it with an extremely powerful attack, or to use a new attack that it hasn't adapted to in order to defeat it. And that's pretty much all of Mahoraga's scaling out of the way, so now it's time to talk about Luffy and see just how strong he is. Luffy at this point of the story should be around the multi-continental to planetary ranges of power. During his final clash with Kaido when Luffy was using his Bajring gun, the feat was calced at the continental ranges of power. Or if you'd like to go with his planetary scaling, then you could scale Luffy above Kaido, which in the One Piece Road to Laugh Tale Volume 3, Oda said that Gear 5th Luffy overwhelmed Kaido. And Kaido was relative to, if not stronger than, Old Whitebeard, who were both Yonko, which are said to be the world's 4 strongest pirates, and are also said to be evenly matched or relative to each other in strength. And Old Whitebeard was stated by Sengoku to be able to destroy the entire planet, with this being backed up by Sengoku, who is not only knowledgeable on Whitebeard and his power, but also knows him as he's clashed with Whitebeard many times in the past. Sengoku's statement is further supported with the One Piece databook Deep Blue, in where it says that the Navy fears that Whitebeard has the power to destroy the world, and again in another section it says that Whitebeard has the power to tilt the entire planet, which again helps support those multi-continental to planetary ranges of power, which again Luffy scales way over during the current point of the series. But we know how strong Luffy is, but what about his speed? Well, we can scale Luffy off of the likes of Kizaru, who has the Pika Pika no Mi. This Devil Fruit allows Kizaru to turn his body into light and attack and move at the speed of light. And in his Vivre card encyclopedia, it stated that the emphasis of his Devil Fruit is speed, meaning that Kizaru does indeed attack, move, and become light itself. And Kizaru is also able to accelerate his speed further, which should be at the least FTL, and Luffy is able to keep up with a mentally nerfed Kizaru during the Egghead arc and give him a pretty good fight. Kizaru is also able to fire off lasers, which function similarly to real world lasers, which should help give further evidence that he attacks at light speed. And the pacifistas were also said to have exact replicas of Kizaru's lasers. In the beginning of post-time skip, Luffy was able to effortlessly dodge them in his base form, and if you use his gear multipliers like his gear 2nd increasing his speed by at least 10 times, and his gear 4 being more than that, and his gear 5th being exponentially greater than that, then you could argue Luffy having speeds that range from at the very least FTL plus all the way to MFTL or maybe even MFTL plus if you consider some of his passive buffs that he's gained so far during the story. But I'll stick with MFTL as that's the most consistent and highest way to scale Luffy at this point in time. And with his speed out of the way, let's go over Luffy's hacks and abilities. So for this particular matchup, I won't be talking about any of Luffy's prior gear transformations except for his gear 5, since they don't really offer much diversity, which is very much needed in a fight with Mahoraga. Luffy's gear 5 is stated to be his peak or height of his abilities and offers him a lot of different unique abilities to work with. Firstly, Luffy is able to transfer his properties of rubber onto whatever he touches, which can be very useful in his fight with Mahoraga. Luffy is also stated to only be limited by his imagination, so he can pretty much do as much as he wants within the confines of his mind. And he is also said to be able to grow stronger the more he laughs, which is something he constantly does while in his transformation. And his body also adapts on its own while maintaining its properties of rubber. And Luffy is also able to recharge his Gear 5 transformation should it run out, although we don't know how often he can do this. And Luffy also has access to all forms of haki, and to give a brief rundown of what each of them can do, Luffy can further strengthen his attacks and defense with armament haki. He can also attack the opponent from the inside out with durability negation with advanced armament haki. He is also able to predict the future and sharpen all of his 5 senses with observation haki, and can even outright see into the future with his advanced observation haki. And then he also has conqueror's haki, which lets him exert his willpower over others, and if they're weaker than him or don't have strong wills of their own, then they will instantly pass out. And he also has advanced conqueror's haki, which lets Luffy attack his opponents without physically touching them. And that's all of Luffy's main abilities covered, so now it's time to answer the question of the video and see if Luffy would be able to actually defeat Mahoraga in battle. Let's find out. So to answer the question of the video, yes, Luffy would be able to defeat Mahoraga. If it's Megumi's version of the Shikigami, it gets cliffed really hard in all stats, as that version of Mahoraga is somewhere around the town to city levels of power, and its speed is also somewhere around the speed of sound at its most charitable interpretation. It doesn't have any feats that could suggest it could keep up with and outbox Luffy before it is able to adapt. So Luffy would be able to defeat Megumi's Mahoraga in a hypothetical fight. But what about Sukuna's? While it is a big step up compared to Megumi's, I still feel as though it lacks the stats to be able to battle Luffy. The highest reasonable scaling you could give to this Mahoraga is somewhere above mountain to island level, since it scales above the likes of Jogo and Dagon. And in terms of speed, it is somewhere around the massively hypersonic plus ranges or lightning levels of speed, as it hasn't shown any light speed feats in the series so far. So Luffy would be able to one-shot and heavily outpace this version of Mahoraga as well. And so to answer the question posed in this video, could Luffy defeat Mahoraga? The answer is yes, and it's not close at all. Thank you all for watching my video, and please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and comment if you'd like to support me and the channel, and would also like to see more power scaling content from me. If you like this One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen video, then you could check out my Sukuna vs Kaido video that is on screen right now, or you could also watch my Luffy vs Gojo video if that's something that interests you. Or if you'd like to see my previous video that I posted, then you could watch my Could Naruto Defeat Yuha video, which is also on screen too. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.